Hello, very good evening. I hope we are live now. Today we are again back on the Dialogue Today live. I'm welcoming all the audience of the Dialogue Today. As we have already discussed that we are going to discuss about the recent development of the Afghanistan, political development or the military development, and also its implication for the world. So today we have again brought up one of the finest minds in Afghanistan and US policy, Professor Aneek Chatterjee. But before going into the debate or the discussion, I would like to show to the viewers of the dialogue today a video clip that we have got in our hand. Obviously, it floated in the social media, but we somehow tried to check its authenticity and we found that the national television of Afghanistan has telecasted this on 2nd of September. This video is quite scary. I would like this video to be played on our screen, but we do not know whether the sources of this video, but it apparently comes true that this video is quite scary. So this video will be played right now.
دا د اوس د بیلابیلو استشهادي ټولنو څخه جوړ یو ګروپ د اسلامي امارت عالم شریف چې په طیبه کلمه مزین دی په ځانګړي درناوي سره د لوج له مخې انتقالوي. د سرو قربانۍ کړه منظور زمون دا رنګینه سودا کړه منظور زمون دا رنګینه سودا اکنون نوبت حمل و انتقال آن اسلحه سنگین، سلاح‌های سبک، ماینه‌های مختلف النوع، بشکه‌های زرد رنگ و موتربم‌ها رسیده است که در راه استقلال و دفاع از کشور در برابر اشغالگران خارجی و غلامان آنها مورد استفاده قرار گرفته‌اند و حالا نیز از آنها استفاده می‌شود. نلرو بالأرمان پرتستاد رضا نلرو بالأرمان پرتست.
As you can see this video where the Talibans and the Taliban regime, today's Taliban regime is parading in front of the world, and this has been telecasted live on Afghan television, as I have told. And there they are showcasing their arsenal, their weapons, and quite interesting, the suicide bombers, the cars that they use for suicide attack, and this is all being displayed. We know about nation states and their parades. They all parade with the military, but this is a day which nobody would have expected that would come. So-called controversial Taliban regime is parading and they are claiming their victory and the victory of the suicide attackers, the suicide bombers, etc. So today we have Professor Aneek Chatterjee with us. Thank you, sir, for joining us. I will definitely give you a formal introduction.
We have our expert for today, Professor Aneek Chatterjee. So he is a distinguished academic, analyst, and author on international relations. He has authored several of seminal work. So his introduction requires a lengthy process. So definitely I will give a lengthy introduction. Professor Aneek Chatterjee is a senior academic, author, and analyst on international relations, as I have already told you. Dr. Chatterjee served as a professor and head of political science department at Presidency University, Kolkata. He was a Fulbright visiting fellow at University of Virginia, USA, and a recipient of the prestigious ICCR Chair to teach in foreign universities. He is currently teaching at the postgraduate department of political science at Hooghly Mohsin College. Dr. Chatterjee already authored and edited 14 books and published 81 research articles in various international and national leading journals. And he delivered more than 150 academic lectures in 16 countries. He sits in the editorial board of 3 reputed international academic journals. Professor Chatterjee, welcome. So first, I will definitely ask about your initial thoughts about this takeover in Afghanistan. But I would like to share my personal thought, because in 2001, 9/11, 2 decades ago, as we are discussing about 9/11 and the return of Talibans today as a theme, I was a school going kid. And many of us, like many of this generation, the millennial generation, were the school going kid. But at that time, you are an academic and you have seen many US administration, probably have discussed and also interacted with many of their representatives here in India and outside also. So, what was your reaction on that evening when this thing happened? And again, on 15th August, 2 decades after, when one fine morning we see the takeover, because it was coming. Many analysts has already told us that it was coming. So I just want to know your journey in this thing and your observation.
Like the whole world, I was also startled on that particular day. If I can remember correctly, we have seen the pictures of a plane crashing into, the WTC, World Trade Center towers, and that was first we couldn't believe it. It was like a movie, the whole world watched it, and it was unbelievable. What was happening actually? Was it a movie really? But the point is, later on, it was known that planes crashed into the WTC tower, and the WTC tower crashed. And ultimately, it was known that the Al Qaeda was behind this kind of terrorist act. So we were all startled. We couldn't believe it. And in a country like USA, which is still considered, and at that time it was also considered one of the superpowers, and one of the remaining superpowers in the world, and there on US soil it happened. That was really, for the world and for me, it was unbelievable. But later on, we found that yes, it really happened, and terrorism again raised its head, may I say, ugly head, and and the war on terror actually started. If I can recollect correctly, the U.S. president at that time, he said that we will take revenge and we will take appropriate action against dastardly act. So the war on terror, the U.S. policy regarding war on terror, it started soon after. So it was a horrifying experience, if I may say so.
So, my next question would be, as you have already mentioned, that there was this war on terror declared by President Bush and his Bush administration immediately. And also, I can recollect in my childhood memories that even we are also shocked, because many people thought that America is superpower and so powerful, and it was a unipolar world. So, we know that how the war on terror being declared by USA and US leadership under NATO. Uh, could you also pass on your observation when the war on terror been declared? What did you think that, because there was with the high hopes, people thought that we are fighting terror, and we know that axis of evil, that the famous quote given by George W. Bush, he famously told that thing, axis of evil.
Yes,
Yes, sir. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
yes. Can you hear me?
I
I
can hear
believe
you. Yeah.
the line snapped for a while. Yes, the war on terror. was actually a US policy, an American policy to sort of quote unquote punish those who carried this type of dastardly act. And it was believed that in Afghanistan, the quote unquote, the so-called terrorists, they took shelter, and Afghanistan became the focal point of the war on terror. And it was believed that in the borders of Pakistan and Afghanistan, they had taken shelter. So the war on terror, although it was a kind of a universal policy applicable to all over the world, but the focal point was, of course, Afghanistan. And to punish the Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, who were reported to be sheltering the Al-Qaeda terrorists. The Talibans were also targeted at that point of time by the US administration. And gradually, with US leadership, several other forces joined, and they arrived in Afghanistan, NATO forces and others, gradually. And the then government, it was removed. So, and the quote unquote, the process of democratization of Afghanistan started soon after. The process of democratization started, and it, as we now know, it went for 2 decades. But again, we all know about the latest happenings. That process has been halted for some time.
Yes, sir. As you have rightly said, the process of democratization, and we, the students of international relations, we have read theories, we have read a lot of texts that that try to justify war on terror with the pretext that it will bring democracy or the liberal internationalism, the policy of liberal internationalism. But 2 decades after that, and I would like to bring an analogy here. There is a very controversial statement that General Bipin Rawat, CDS of India, has recently told in a lecture, where he said that the capitalist democracy and the capitalist world that is dooming. And he rightly, I think you are also aware that he has been, like, even the Ministry of External Affairs, Jaishankar, has rebuked that thing, that statement, that he said that there was this thing, he brought that ideological thing, that Francis Fukuyama wrote that book, The End of History and the Last Man. And he said that we also thought that this is the end. The ideology is that the liberal ideology, the capitalist democracy, will be taken to undemocratic regimes. And Afghanistan was definitely an undemocratic regime, and the installation of a democratic regime, so-called democratic regime. So in my last discussion with Professor Shubhajit Noshkar also, I asked this thing, that what changed, that is that the failure of war on terror and failure to lose the war also somewhere helped or somewhere forced this American administration and the Western world to abandon the philosophical term of democratization of undemocratic regimes.
Now, the liberal ideology, it supports democracy, as we all know. It supports pluralism, a pluralistic society. But at the same time, we must keep in mind that liberalism and its variants, like neoliberalism, today we talk about neoliberalism. And ultimately, neoliberalism is more concerned about market, an open market and free market. If you study Friedman's work, if you study Hayek's work, Nozick's work, the political economic, I would say, base of liberalism and neoliberalism, ultimately it supports a free market, open market economy. And an open market economy can best thrive in a pluralist society. Because if you have some kind of, pluralist ideals in the society, market would be more inclusive. That is one reason I believe everybody will gradually have access to market, although economic factors are very important. So if you ask me, for open market economy, democracy and free thinking, whatever you call it, these are the necessary conditions. That is why liberalism and now neoliberalism, they are constantly talking about democracy and peace, everything. Their basic idea is to have a liberal market economy. So market economy is the prime motive. Now, if you think of Afghanistan, when we talk about market and expanding market, so every place in the world comes in. Every place in the world is mapped for market. So I would say liberalism, yes, paved a way for this kind of intervention. We, as you know, we in international relations, we have one word, one concept now, that humanitarian intervention. And humanitarian intervention is best supported by liberal ideology. So I would say the liberal ideology actually helped in this kind of intervention, which the US termed as humanitarian intervention in Afghanistan. It helped, of course, and I would say another motive was capturing more and more, markets. So that was another, venture. That was another target by the Americans and the Western world.
So, in the populist belief, those who are populist and they are anti-America, anti-US, and anti-US policies, they often say the invasion of Iraq was for oil, but in Afghanistan we do not have oil, but there were other resources. But definitely you have said that it's about expanding the market, and the market expansion, the liberal order and neoliberal order of today tries to focus on. So my next question would be, like, what changed priorities and changed focuses of present day neoliberal capitalism has taken up for this co-opting the jihadi culture, whereas global capitalism and consumerism, as we know from theoretical base, that at its core was apparently based on the advocacy of culture of multiculturalism, liberal democracy, etc. So why this transition? Like, why they are ready to negotiate with some like authoritarian regime or semi-theocratic regime? Because we can safely assume that Afghanistan is going to be a theocratic regime. Then if Afghanistan they can abandon and they can go on recognizing Afghanistan, my interesting question would be, like, why not Iran then? Why their dual policy in Iran?
It's a good question, I would say. Now, regarding the jihadists, regarding multiculturalism, regarding a change of stance in liberalism on neoliberalism, that is what you wanted to know. My take would be that, liberalism also believes in some kind of adjustment. Liberalism in everywhere, liberalism, because of the potential of market, it believes in some kind of adjustment. And that adjustment may be democratic, that adjustment may be semi-democratic, semi-authoritarian. I mean, if you relate this to liberal or neoliberal ideology, I mean the intervention in Afghanistan, if you relate it to liberal or neoliberal ideology, then you have to think in terms of adjustment for markets, adjustment for democratization. So this type of adjustment, I would say, this is, and here multiculturalism also creeps in, because multiculturalism, if you think of Imlika and others, multiculturalism is actually an adjustment of several cultures, and where peaceful coexistence of different cultures, that is multiculturalism, where even the minority culture would prosper, and the minority culture would not be dominated by the majority culture. So here again, liberalism, this type of adjustment suits liberal policies. You are right, because multiculturalism, if it is again an adjustment. Now, if we think of Afghanistan for the last 2 decades, we have seen this kind of adjustment took place. Now it is different, because there all the cultural groups and even religious groups, they coexisted together in Afghanistan for the last 2 decades. The majority, Pashtuns with the other ethnic communities, the Hajaras, the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, they coexisted, and that coexistence helped liberal or neoliberal ideology, if you relate it to neoliberal ideology, because ultimately this helps a stable, as we know, political stability or economic stability always helps business to prosper. So that actually helped. But having said this, we must also think that why the say an authoritarian regime, if we call it, why it came back. Then did the US abandon its policy? That is a $1 million question that we can discuss simultaneously. But the point is here, the adjustment, multiculturalism, neoliberal philosophy, they all go together simultaneously. They all go hand in hand, if you ask me.
So my next question would be slightly different. I will be going back to the policy of war on terror once again, and I will try to club together two questions that I have. That how Afghanistan, for example, because we know AFPAC region, because in our first discussion we have discussed about AFPAC region, how it was a heaven for the extremist and the terrorist breeding zone. But why only Afghanistan drawn into the war on terror? And if I read into the international relations history and the growth of this Islamist terrorism, so we also see that Sudan was also having some link with Al Qaeda, and then Al Qaeda somewhere went to Afghanistan and they were hovered by Taliban. So why Afghanistan drawn into this war on terror? And since we are seeing the Caesar of this war of terror, former Caesar of war of terror, then what is the current policy, what the Western world is having for US Afghanistan?
I believe that for the US and for a few other countries, there were changes in the political, in administration. In the US, particularly, one president was defeated. The former president, Donald Trump, was defeated in the elections, and a new president came. And for the US, as we know, the US system, a presidential, views, the views of the president is very important. Now, both of them, particularly Biden promised during his election campaign that if he came to power, he would call back the US Army from Afghanistan, as we all know. So that helped. And there was also domestic pressure and and at the same time, if you are in a foreign country for 2 decades, it is a huge burden on your exchequer, on your foreign exchange also. So at the same time, domestic pressure, economic crisis, I would say, because the COVID-19 hit at that time. So all these factors actually compelled the US to withdraw forces. A change of presidency and a new president, his views, his election campaigns, economic setback, and domestic political pressure. This actually compelled the US to withdraw forces from Afghanistan. And for some other countries in Western Europe, the economic condition is not very good in Western Europe. At the same time, they are they, in many countries, economy is in doldrums, if I may say so. So that led to abandon, I would say, quote unquote, to abandon Afghanistan and withdraw their forces. So that, in my opinion, that was the compelling reason behind the current US policy. That was the compelling reason, economic setback and domestic pressure, change of presidency, so on and so forth.
So here I would also like to ask you, as you have rightly told that the change of presidency, we have seen this year the change of presidency, uh, President Biden coming into power, but he once hold the position of vice president in Obama administration, and he has some kind of reservation about the Afghanistan war from that time only. But I just want to know, like, would have it been any different if any other president have come, if not Donald Trump, any other president? There were a lot of competitors, there were a lot of competitors, because don't you think the mood of the nation in USA had been for some while that to call back the soldiers? There have been anti-war protests, etc., etc. We are saying not like the Vietnam time, but there were this thing. And also, sir, I would like to ask that you rightly said that about the neoliberal economy, because I was going through some reports and the records that in Afghanistan most of the business were surrounded to this MIC, military industrial complex, because I see there right now the military contractors are also from US. They are also pulling out, not just the military, they're military contractors. There's those who were like outsourced for the Afghanistan army as well. So like I want to know, is that process that happened in last 6 months, like, because we are seeing an administration of Biden for 6 months, it's not about just the Trump. Even like, was it the mood shifted from the time when Obama was at his last quarters of presidency, or like this thing?
Yes, if you talk in terms of shifting, mood shifting, or the public opinion, shifting of public opinion, yes, that happened. If I can hear you correctly, if I can follow you correctly, that really did happen. From Obama's time to Trump's time, to say now Joe Biden's time. And as I mentioned already, there was huge, domestic public pressure. The public opinion was going against, staying in Afghanistan for a long time. So that really shifted the US policy. And apart from that, I would also, because we are talking about neoliberal policy, the economic factor must be taken into account. The economic setback, the US economy is not in a good shape right now due to various reasons. So economic factor is one dominant factor, and the shifting of public opinion is another, I would say, factor. And the maintaining Afghanistan, the US had to spend a lot. I mean, maintaining soldiers in Afghanistan, as we had seen earlier with Soviet Union. So finally, US decided in favor of withdrawal, leaving Afghanistan, I would say, in a turmoil.
Sir, now I will come to Afghanistan right now, the present day Afghanistan. We know the swift takeover of Taliban, and this kind of swift transition 3 decades ago also we have seen, like we didn't see, but maybe you have seen during Soviet Union, and it is not too far from Afghanistan, and Soviets are also related to Afghanistan in the historical time, and not a single bullet has been shot. technically, even during the Afghan Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, during that time there was no resistance. At least on that day, there were some resistance by the Afghan commandos, but that they ultimately surrendered. So now we are only seeing the resistance in a small valley. It's Panjshir Valley, and that has created a lot of attention and interest among the world, the people of the world and the global diaspora. Um, I just want to know what future this tiny valley hold, because there are contested claims that Talibans are claiming that they have taken control of that valley, and the national forces there, the Panjshir Valley people under the leadership of Amarullah Saleh and Ahmad Shah Massoud's son, young son. So they are fighting, still they are fighting. They haven't surrendered yet formally.
It is very difficult to control Afghanistan. No single force could ever control Afghanistan. That is history. I mean, now the Talibans, they are controlling almost the whole of Afghanistan. Panjshir Valley, as you have correctly pointed out, they have taken over. But the point is, this resistance movement will continue. And if you take into account the ethnic, difference among different ethnic communities in Afghanistan, they never favor the takeover by any single ethnic group. The Talibans are mostly Pashtuns, and they are Sunnis. There are Shias and other ethnic communities like Hajaras. Hajaras are mostly Shias. So there is intense ethnic rivalry, and even in some cases there is religious groupings. So I believe the resistant movements will continue, and most importantly, the resistant movements will get support from adjoining countries. You can't rule out that the adjoining countries they are not involved. The adjoining countries, they have huge stake in Afghanistan. Firstly, because Afghanistan is a gateway to Central Asia, is a gateway to West Asia, as you know. So Central Asia has now huge resources, natural gas, oil, and every other thing. So that way, Afghanistan is very crucial. Who is controlling Afghanistan? That is politically crucial, that is economically very crucial, because you have access to Central Asian resources. That is why China is very much interested in Afghanistan. If you ask me, I'll say China's sole interest is economic and business, because China had excellent relations with all regimes during the last 2 decades. With democratic Afghanistan, during the last 2 decades, China had excellent relationship. So China is now having good relations with Taliban. Why? The point is, China has huge stake in Afghanistan, in Central Asian countries. So China would be more interested in economic gains rather than political, political turmoil. And other states, the adjoining states, the Central Asian states, including, I would say, Russia, they have huge stakes in Afghanistan. So the resistance movement, unknowingly or unknowingly, will get support from several other adjoining countries. So the resistance movement will continue within Afghanistan and with the help of extra regional forces. I would say regional forces and its extra-regional forces. So the resistance movement will continue.
Sir, this follows me up to a question. Like, so you are somewhere predicting the resurfacing of the great game, because Afghanistan also was part of this great game once upon a time. So in near future, can we see a great game scenario once again?
Beg your pardon?
In near future, we are going to see the great game scenario once again, the great game and the rivalries.
We can't rule out. We can't rule out. You are right. because now the big powers in world politics, they are already involved in Afghanistan. If we think of USA, if we think of China, if we think of Russia, they are the stakeholders. So there are talks about, alliances, counter alliances over Afghanistan. One alliance could be, all these are speculations, one alliance could be China, Pakistan, maybe Russia with them, and to some extent Turkey, Iran. If that is one alliance, the counter alliance would be some other forces, including India. So another great game may not be ruled out, because already we are thinking in terms of China-US rivalry in global politics, and China-US rivalry over Afghanistan also. So many are thinking that it is a Chinese victory, some sort of, with the withdrawal of US forces, American forces. China has gained a victory. Russia has gained a victory. These are in the air, and at the same time, Pakistan, China, this axis, or this combination, whatever you call it, they are on the upper hand. They have gained something, but the great game, cannot be ruled out as far as Afghanistan is concerned, because all the big powers are currently stakeholders in Afghanistan. USA, Russia, China, some other European powers, Britain, and Pakistan, India, they are all, Iran, Turkey, they are all involved. So it is not ruled out. Another great game in Afghanistan, over Afghanistan, is not ruled out.
Sir, I will quickly, as the show has already passed 40 minutes, so we are in the last segment. So I will ask you a few questions, two more questions rather. So you talked about resistance, and resistance, often we are seeing armed resistance and also the public resistance, and we are also seeing a social resistance in Afghanistan. Already women are registering there. Some people have already fled, some haven't not. And in near future, we are also anticipating that we can also see a social resistance, a social movements in today's world, when we are seeing neoliberal world is rocked by social movement, new social movements. So is there possibility of new social movements culture penetrating Afghanistan? And also at that time, can we see some proactive role of this international community? Because right now the international community, obviously, if we think about UN, is very much dormant, is sitting very much dormant, but apart from making some statements. And also here I would like to club a question, like during the time of Najibullah, even played a proactive role. Now Panshiris are doing a resistance. Even India once helped Panshir during Ahmad Shah Massoud. We know that links, but India cannot do geographically right now, even if it wants. But can we see that if we see the women resisting, because there have been many cultural shifts? Because I was reading a article there. Earlier, we have seen in representation in Afghanistan movies or documentaries, the Afghan women used to wear the burqas in blue color. Now they are wearing the burqas in black color. This could be some kind of Wahhabi or some Salafist ideology penetrating Afghanistan. And also I am seeing that penetration of internet, because these Afghani women had internet access. Earlier they did not have internet access that much before 2 decades. So this thing is there is a possibility, a ray of hope that something could change what we have seen, a sudden tectonic shift that could also change with the new social movement?
One good thing about the last 2 decades of democratic process in Afghanistan, where India also participated as far as the civil construction and other areas were concerned. One good thing about this democratic process during the last 2 decades was the penetration of different ideas, different cultures in Afghanistan. You talked about internet. There was also the cable TVs were also there, and the schools, colleges, universities were very much open to the women. to everybody, and they got some kind of the taste of freedom, the Afghan women, which they missed during the earlier Taliban regime from 1996 to 2001. So everything has its effect, you know. So these 2 decades of democratization, I would say, to some extent, brought some new ideas to Afghanistan. Uh, One who was born in, say, 2002, and now he or she would be 19 years old. They had not seen the earlier Taliban regime. They were born and brought up in a quote unquote democratic society. So that helped. And, you know, I was talking about pluralism. I was talking about pluralism, and that pluralistic society existed during the last 2 decades in Afghanistan. So all kinds of, you know, ideas, ideologies, even through internet, through television, everything penetrated into Afghanistan. So we have already seen the manifestation. The women, they were protesting against the armed Talibans. That was unthinkable, you know, during 96, 2001. A group of women protesting against armed Talibans. That was a major development. And I think these kind of social movements will continue. Maybe they would be suppressed, they would be brutalized, but you know, you can't suppress a population for a very long time. So yes, there would be fear. The fear psychosis would be there, but there would be protests at the same time. Protest maybe very minor protest, maybe protest in lifestyle, as you talked about the burqas, and maybe protest through cultural, you know, changes. It will continue in Afghanistan. So social movements will continue.
Sir, we cannot discuss Afghanistan because it's in our neighborhood in terms of India, and we when we were the students of international relations, or when we were in schools, we heard so much about SARC and the SARC grouping. Now it's my personal question. We have seen a defunct SARC. It's a counterintuitive question. Like, if SARC was functional, could SARC could have been a robust organization and somewhere may have given the Afghanistan democracy a boost, rather than totally depending on the superpower or the so-called superpower US?
This is another very good question. You know, the role of regional organizations are very important. You know, if you look at ASEAN, if you look at European Union, 2 bright examples. Although European Union have many discontents, but they are still functioning. Still, they are functioning as a cohesive group, and that is an economic success. European Union. The same is true about ASEAN. ASEAN is also an economic success. But as you know, sadly enough, in our region, politics dominated economics. SARC could not function the way it was designed to. The SARC could not follow the ASEAN way, you know. ASEAN had many political rivalries when it started. You know, huge political rivalries within the ASEAN countries, but they had to overcome all political rivalries, and they worked as a cohesive economic group. But here, sadly, here we could not do that. SARC could not do that. You are right. If SARC could provide some sort of support to Afghanistan, economic, political, even military, even the scenario would have been different. A successful regional organization can always help any country in the region, specifically economically. So the failure, I would say, or the non-performance of SARC is an issue here. You have rightly pointed out. And if SARC was, very active, SARC could have definitely helped Afghanistan come out of the crisis. Definitely, I think that way.
Even sir, I think like even in economic terms also, if SARC was active, the investments that India have made, almost so many billions of rupees they have made, that could have been revived, or that could have a meaningful end. Somewhere it is in darkness right now. We don't know what policy Indian government is going to take in regards of Afghanistan. My last question would be like the role of Pakistan. We cannot like avoid this thing. It's a very common question, but I want to know, like, we have seen that we talk about Baradar, we talk about others, Haqqani Network, etc., etc. But I was saying this funny person, Chief Amir of Afghanistan, Akunzada. So he was the first person who kind of sought allegiance to Al Qaeda. And he is again made the chief Amir of Afghanistan, of this regime, or whatever the regime they are going to build somewhere. And the ISI chief role, we have seen ISI chief already visiting Afghanistan, doing photo op session with the Taliban leaders and greeting them. But many people are saying this Afghanistan or this Taliban will not be totally under the instruction of Pakistan or the Pakistani ISI regime. They also have China. But what role India would play, at least to thwart the danger of Talibanis or other extremist outfits in Afghanistan or in Afpak region, being used as proxy in not only in Kashmir, in other parts of India, even because Punjab is also becoming a little bit of tense scenario right now.
As far as Pakistan is concerned, I don't think Pakistan will benefit much from the Afghanistan trouble. Pakistan's sole aim may be to, be, harassing India a bit. But if you look at Pakistan, the overall society, economics, and politics of Pakistan, already the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, TTP, they had created enormous trouble within Pakistan. Right now, I'm reminded of Peshawar killings happened some years back. And that was, the work of the TTP, Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. Now, in Pakistan, it is a common belief that Pakistan has gained, as I told you earlier. That is a common belief that Pakistan has gained as of now from the Afghanistan imbroglio. But the point is, Pakistani economy is a very shaky condition. And Pakistan, there are several ethnic groups in Pakistan. They will also pressurize the Pakistani administration for a separate Pashtun state within Pakistan. And they believe that the Talibans would help them. They believe that because the Talibans are also Pashtuns majority, so Pakistan faces that danger. Another state within Pakistan composed of the Pashtuns. So that political danger is there. The economy is in doldrums. That is why Pakistan is too much dependent on China. And you are right, ISI is playing a major role because ISI wants to establish its own control, Pakistani army especially, wants to establish its own control over Pakistani politics. Always this happened. So that is another dimension. Why ISI is so active? Maybe now, quote unquote, the democratic government is using the ISI in Afghanistan, the Imran Khan government. But I would say the military is using the ISI more than the Imran Khan government. And the military's sole aim is to harass India. As far as, terrorist activities in Kashmir and different parts of India is concerned, well, we have to be on high alert, not only along the borders, not only in Kashmir, all over India, because disruptive forces may get encouragement from the developments in Afghanistan. So India has to be on high alert. But I personally believe that Pakistan would not be a huge gainer. The future will prove Pakistan would not be a huge gainer from the current Afghan scenario.
Sir, my last question would be like we are living in a very troubled situation as talking about India, because we always in military terms or defense term we talk about two fronts, right? So earlier we never thought that even from Pakistan front that Talibanis or the Afghanistan forces or Afghanistan even the extremist forces would come in aid of Pakistan in near future if there is a possibility of two front war, because already again I will refer to General Bipin Rawat's recent remark where he said that he quoted Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilization, and he said that it would be a cynic Islamic collaboration. Again, that's kind of thing. Already we are seeing this happening in this Pakistan and China is taking so much of interest, and China is a superpower in building or superpower in rise. They are taking an interest in Afghanistan. So can we just see there's a problem with this countries, Afghanistan or Taliban's at the helm of Afghanistan, siding with them and creating trouble for India and not remaining
Yes, the,
diplomatic.
yes, the chances are there. India, one policy of China is to surround India from all sides. And China is moving that way. That is encircling India, I would say, encircling India, and Pakistan would prove to be a very suitable ally in that venture. But the point is, India, first of all, it has to be alert. And if you talk about, say, a religious congregation, if you talk about, say, something like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, or any other country, I would say uh, there are talks about political Islam and everything. But the political Islam is not a homogeneous, phenomenon. Again, political Islam is very diversified. Some called it religious nationalism. Some even related to secularism. Some even related to multiculturalism. So
Muslim.
that won't help Pakistan or Afghanistan much. I mean, that kind of sentiment that political Islam is there, because political Islam is highly heterogeneous. There are huge diversity within political Islam. But the point is about China. China, Pakistan, this will continue to embarrass India, continue to trouble India. But at the same time, I believe India should should be more proactive in its diplomacy. India should counter this type of congregation, whatever we think in terms of, say, quote unquote anti-Indian alliances. We have to counter that diplomatically as well as through other means.
Thank you, sir. We have almost reached 1 hour. So thanks for the time. But I think there is a lot of discussions. We need you for another session. Definitely, there are a lot of questions, and definitely today we cannot take question from the audience. For later session, we can definitely take question from the audience, and if you give us some time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Dialogue Today, for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. You are doing great work. Continue. All my best wishes to Dialogue Today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.